Let's talk about colonizing a planet, packing up and leaving the Earth for a new home on the surface of an alien world, extending the light of consciousness to the stars in the words of Elon Musk. Exploring new worlds is the backbone of our favorite science fiction fantasies. Flying around in space is cool and all, but at some point, our heroes have to step off onto a new planet with new adventures, and for humanity, that first step towards a multiplanetary existence will undoubtedly have to be Mars. We've had our eye on the red planet for decades, and it's finally looking like now is our time to take that next giant leap and establish a human presence on the planet Mars. But it's not going to be easy, obviously. In fact, the difficulties posed by a Martian settlement are staggering, the level of danger is terrifying, but the human innovations that are rising to meet these challenges are equally as stunning. If we can manage to work together towards that one common goal, then extending humanity to a multiplanetary existence really starts to feel like something that we can accomplish in this generation. This is the space race. Okay, so the first inconvenient truth that you run into when looking closely at the whole Martian situation is just how exceptionally deadly the planet Mars is to human beings. There is nothing hospitable about this environment whatsoever, and that's going to be the first big problem that we need to solve. Probably the biggest obstacle on Mars is going to be its very thin atmosphere. The atmospheric pressure on Mars is less than 1% of what we have here on Earth. That means that human beings would not be able to survive outside of a pressurized environment. Even if we could breathe on Mars, the low pressure would cause your circulatory system to fail in less than a minute. This also means that liquid water is physically impossible on Mars. At an average temperature of -60 degrees Celsius, water on the surface would be frozen solid. But even if you were to heat up the ice on Mars to the point of melting, it would never become liquid due to the low-pressure environment. Water will transfer straight from solid ice to gas or vapor. Then there's dust. Mars is known for its humongous dust storms that can span for miles on end. About once every decade, a dust storm consumes the entire planet. We don't even know exactly why that happens, but it's a serious problem for any technology that happens to be on the surface. In 2018, NASA's Opportunity rover was killed off by a dust storm that coated it to the point that the solar panels failed. Martian dust is electrostatic, so it has a unique tendency to cling to any surface. If you think sand gets everywhere, just wait until you see Martian dust, and if that wasn't enough, the dust is toxic. Exposure to Mars dust is likely to cause serious lung diseases in humans, so anything that enters our habitat needs to be completely dust-free. And, just in case that wasn't enough, we have cosmic radiation on top of it all. Because Mars has very little atmosphere, it also has very little protection from the unfathomably gigantic nuclear reactor that is our Sun. We still don't know exactly what that means for human life on the planet. We have ideas about shielding Martian colonists from cosmic radiation, but it's unlikely we can block out 100% of the waves. And we don't have data for what kind of effect that will have on people. The most we have to go on is the Apollo astronauts, who spent a few days outside of Earth's magnetic field. They seemed to be fine. Most of those guys lived to a ripe old age with few complications. Buzz Aldrin is still punching flat earthers in the face at 90 years old. But what happens after weeks, months, or years of exposure? We don't know. And the first colonists on Mars will be our guinea pigs for this experiment. People going to Mars will pretty much have to accept that exposure to cosmic radiation is part of the job, and that could turn them into the Fantastic Four or give them space cancer. While talking about sending people to Mars, Elon Musk famously said, "People will probably die," and he's probably right on that one. The pioneer phase of Mars settlement will be harsh, to say the least. But can it ever get any easier? All of the evidence that we have points to the fact that Mars wasn't always a frozen desert planet. We are pretty sure that liquid water was present on the surface at some point in its 4.6 billion year history. There's even still hope that we might find some kind of fossilized remains of life on Mars. And that means there was an atmosphere at one point in time. So, what happened to it, and can we get it back? Can we terraform Mars into an Earth-like environment? The theory is that if a planet's atmosphere disappeared, it could have gone one of two directions. Either the atmospheric elements like carbon dioxide were absorbed into the surface of the planet, or those elements dissipated out into space. Unfortunately for us, it seems like the situation on Mars is the latter. it's likely that solar winds blew away the atmosphere from Mars. The reason this likely happened is because of magnetic fields. We know that the interior of Earth is very lively. We live on tectonic plates that float on top of a layer of molten rock that surrounds Earth's hot, rotating core. Earth's interior generates a powerful magnetic field that extends from the center of Earth out into space around us, creating a protective shield against all the dangerous stuff coming at us from the sun on a daily basis. Mars doesn't have that. There are no plate tectonics or rotating magnetic core on the planet as far as we can tell. It's just a big chunk of rock, so no protective shield, at least not now. It may have been different in the past, but at some point, that activity stopped. Over billions of years, the Martian atmosphere just escaped into space. So all that to say, putting the atmosphere back over Mars is not going to be easy or even possible, but that hasn't stopped people from coming up with some crazy ideas. Take Elon Musk, for example. He thinks we should nuke Mars. It sounds crazy, but he's got the right idea. We know that there is carbon dioxide and hydrogen and oxygen on Mars' surface. The polar regions of the planet contain a lot of ice. So, the nuke Mars theory suggests that if we were to detonate a whole bunch of nuclear bombs in space above the poles, we could essentially create the effect of a miniature sun over Mars, generating enough heat to melt the surface and release all the greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We could, in effect, create global warming on Mars. But it probably won't work, at least it won't work anywhere near well enough to justify nuking a planet. Because we know the majority of greenhouse gases that existed on Mars went up into space, not down into the surface. Even if we did release all the stored-up gas in those polar regions, it wouldn't pressurize the planet. Most scientists agree the best we could hope for is getting the atmospheric pressure up to about 7% of what we have on Earth. And unfortunately, that's all we've got right now. If we're going to go, we have to deal with the fact that Mars is actively trying to kill us at all times. Terraforming Mars might happen someday, but it's going to require us to invent something that doesn't exist right now, and that's a topic for a whole other video. So if we can't make Mars more like Earth, we'll have to bring Earth-like conditions to Mars. Fortunately, NASA has already made a start on that problem with a new experiment by the Perseverance rover. The Mars Oxygen In Situ Resource Utilization Experiment, or MOXIE for short, has succeeded in transforming a small amount of Mars' carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere into oxygen. The current MOXIE unit is about the size of a toaster and uses extreme heat, around 800 degrees Celsius, to separate oxygen atoms from carbon dioxide molecules. If this technology is scalable to provide for a settlement, then we've at least got a chance. Elon Musk thinks we should live in cities under glass domes, which would be cool and futuristic, and it's reasonable to think we could create a microclimate within the dome with a pressurized atmosphere. But we'd have to transport dome materials to Mars or set up a dome manufacturing facility there. Even if we could build it, the dome would get covered in dust, and we'd end up in a big dusty glue. And the chance of the dome material properly shielding us from cosmic radiation is low. NASA has this idea for 3D printed dirt eggs. This best idea, so far, comes from American architecture firm AI Space Factory, which won NASA's 3D printed habitat challenge with their plan to use Martian rocks as a building material for an egg-shaped habitat. Basalt could be mined from the surface, crushed, and mixed with a plant-based bioplastic to create a strong, 3D printable material. Concentric circles of rock and plant mixture would be laid down by an automated robot, and AI Space Factory believes the material would harden into a structure resistant to cosmic radiation and extreme temperatures. The egg shape is chosen for structural efficiency, as it's one of nature's greatest designs, an incredibly thin shell with just the right amount of strength. It's a cool idea but has flaws. A sophisticated airlock system would be needed in any building design on Mars. So, having personal homes seems extra. You can't just walk through the front door and pop your helmet off, not only because of air pressure but also due to the toxic dust on you, which can't be tracked into the house. Realistically, the best bet for people on Mars is to live underground. It's not exciting, and it seems pointless to be on another planet if you're just inside a windowless room all day. But if we want to be practical, the safest place is underground. Work on the surface, and then live underground. Tunnels would allow humans to live protected from dust storms, solar radiation, and the bitter cold.